Shockwaves in the royal family tonight. Prince Harry lies on his deathbed as Meghan storms out in tears after William coldly refuses to forgive his dying brother. The world watches in disbelief as a heartbreaking royal tragedy unfolds. Prince Harry, battling an aggressive stage 4 autoimmune disease triggered by years of mental strain and emotional trauma, has made one final plea to his brother William, a desperate request for forgiveness before it's too late. But insiders reveal William's icy refusal sent Meghan Markle into a furious outburst, storming out of the hospital as aides scrambled to calm tensions. What drove William to walk away from his dying brother? Why is Meghan blaming the palace for Harry's devastating condition? And could this be the moment that finally shatters the House of Windsor forever? Stay with us as we uncover the explosive details behind this royal heartbreak and the secrets the family doesn't want you to hear. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It was a moment no one could have predicted, yet one that seemed inevitable given the years of bitterness and pain. The corridors of the exclusive London hospital were thick with tension, the air heavy with whispers of heartbreak and regret. Behind the closed doors of a private suite, Prince Harry lay pale and frail, his once vibrant energy reduced to shallow breaths and a fragile frame. His diagnosis, an aggressive stage 4 autoimmune disease, had sent shockwaves through royal circles. But what unfolded that evening wasn't just a medical emergency. It was the unraveling of a brotherhood, a family, and perhaps even the monarchy itself. Minutes earlier, Meghan Markle had walked briskly into the hospital room, clutching Harry's hand tightly, her eyes rimmed with red from hours of crying. Doctors and nurses gave them a wide berth, understanding that this was no ordinary patient and no ordinary situation. Meghan had been inconsolable ever since the diagnosis was confirmed, a rare, brutal condition that had been silently attacking Harry's organs for years, exacerbated by relentless stress and emotional strain. She had been by his side through every blood test, every late-night panic, every moment of despair. But nothing could prepare her for what came next. Prince William, heir to the throne, had finally arrived at the hospital after repeated pleas from palace aides and senior royals. For weeks, Harry had begged to see his brother. He wanted to speak one last time, to bury the hatchet before it was too late. Meghan had taken it upon herself to call William directly, despite knowing how strained their relationship had become. This was Harry's dying wish, she told him. Surely even William, with all his icy composure, couldn't refuse a man on his deathbed. When William entered the suite, his face was a mask of control. He nodded to Meghan curtly, barely making eye contact, then turned his gaze toward the frail figure lying in the bed. For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint beeping of medical monitors. Harry struggled to sit up, his voice trembling as he whispered his brother's name. William. But before Harry could say another word, Meghan's voice cracked the silence. "Thank you for coming," she said, her tone thick with emotion. "This means the world to him." William's jaw tightened. He took a single step closer to the bed, his hands clasped behind his back, and spoke in a voice colder than the winter rain falling outside. "I'm here because they said it was urgent. But let's not pretend everything can be fixed in one conversation." Harry's eyes welled with tears. He reached out a shaky hand, but William didn't move. Meghan stared at the air with disbelief, her own hands trembling. "Please," she urged softly. "He doesn't have much time. Whatever happened in the past, can't you let it go? For him." But William's face hardened even more. "I can't," he said simply. "Some wounds don't heal." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Harry's hand fell back to his side. Meghan's mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out. Then, without another glance at his brother, William turned and walked out of the room. That was the moment Meghan snapped. "Unbelievable," she hissed under her breath as she stormed out behind William, her heels clicking furiously on the polished floor. Aides scrambled to keep up with her as she tore through the hallway, her face a mixture of rage and heartbreak. "He's your brother," she shouted after William, her voice echoing down the corridor. "How can you be so heartless? Do you want him to die thinking you hated him?" William didn't stop. He didn't turn around. He simply kept walking, his shoulders stiff and his head high, as if carrying the weight of centuries of royal tradition on his back. Those who witnessed the scene said they had never seen Meghan like that. Her carefully composed public persona shattered in an instant. One nurse reportedly overheard her sobbing later in a private waiting room, whispering over and over, "They're killing him." The The palace is killing him. For Harry, this may have been the final blow. For the royal family, it was a moment of reckoning. And for the public, it raised painful questions about loyalty, forgiveness, and the price of being born into a life of unimaginable privilege and scrutiny. Is this how it ends? Two brothers, once inseparable, torn apart by duty, pride, and pain. One slipping away from life, the other unable to find it in his heart to forgive. Or is there still time for redemption? As we unravel this heartbreaking story, we'll explore how Harry's deadly illness unfolded, the years of trauma that led to this moment, and the role Meghan and the palace may have played in this tragic saga. Stay with us, because what happens next could change the future of the royal family forever. The room was quiet now, except for the hum of medical equipment and the shallow, strained breathing of Prince Harry. Meghan sat by his side, her fingers curled around his cold hand, as though her touch alone could tether him to this world a little longer. The color had drained from his face, leaving his freckled skin pale and almost translucent, as if life itself was slipping away from him. To the outside world, he was still the bold, adventurous prince who had walked behind his mother's coffin as a boy and later rebelled against the rigid traditions of the monarchy. But here, in this stark hospital suite shielded from cameras and public scrutiny, he was just a man. Broken, fragile, and running out of time. The diagnosis had come like a thunderclap weeks earlier, shattering the delicate facade of normalcy Meghan and Harry had tried to maintain. It wasn't just an illness, it was a verdict. Aggressive stage for autoimmune disease. A rare and merciless condition that had been silently attacking his body for years, disguising itself in symptoms that were easy to dismiss: fatigue, joint pain, weight loss, until it was far too late. A royal medical consultant, speaking under the condition of anonymity, described the disease as a perfect storm born of unrelenting psychological trauma and physical stress. It had slowly destroyed key organs, leaving Harry's immune system in a state of chaos. His own body had turned against him, attacking healthy cells as though they were invaders. For years, he had hidden his pain behind a smile. There were whispers even back then. Concerns from aides and friends who noticed Harry seemed gaunt, distracted, quick to anger or tears. But Harry, raised in an environment where vulnerability was a weakness, had brushed off their worries. Meghan had begged him to see specialists in California after they left royal life, but even then he resisted, convinced it was just exhaustion. By the time he collapsed in Montecito weeks ago, his condition had advanced beyond repair. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital as Meghan clutched Archie and Lilibet in her arms, her voice breaking as she explained to the children that Daddy was sick. Inside the hospital, the prognosis was grim. The disease was systemic, and the doctors said even the most aggressive treatments offered little chance of survival. Meghan had reportedly refused to leave his side, sleeping in a chair beside his bed night after night, her once pristine appearance giving way to dark circles under her eyes and tear-streaked cheeks. He's been fighting for so long, one medical staffer revealed quietly. But now his body doesn't have much left to give. It's heartbreaking to watch. As the days passed, Harry's condition worsened. His once strong voice was now a hoarse whisper. The man who had served on the front lines in Afghanistan, who had launched the Invictus Games for wounded veterans, could barely lift a glass of water to his lips. Meghan fed him soup with a spoon like a child, gently wiping his mouth after each sip. But it wasn't just the illness eating away at him. It was the emotional weight he carried. "Do you think William hates me that much?" he asked Meghan one night, his eyes wet with unshed tears. "I never wanted it to end like this." Meghan shook her head, forcing a smile though her heart was breaking. "He doesn't hate you, Harry. He's hurting too. But I'll make him see. He'll come. He has to." It was then Meghan made the decision to call William herself. The conversation was brief and tense. William listened silently as Meghan explained Harry's condition, her voice trembling as she spoke of Harry's dying wish to see his brother one last time. "Please," she had pleaded. "He doesn't have much time. He needs you." There was a long pause on the other end before William replied, "I'll see what I can do." For Meghan, that wasn't good enough. "He's your brother," she said sharply. "This is your chance to make things right. Don't wait until it's too late." But William, true to form, said nothing more before ending the call. Meghan hung up, her hands shaking. She turned to Harry, forcing herself to sound confident. "He'll come," she whispered. "I know he will." But in her heart, she wasn't so sure. As Harry drifted into a fitful sleep, Meghan stared at the monitors, watching the numbers fluctuate. Each beep was a reminder of how fragile life had become. She couldn't help but think of all the times Harry had begged her to run away with him, to escape the suffocating grip of royal life. They thought leaving would save them, but had it only delayed the inevitable? Now, as the man she loved teetered on the edge of life and death, Meghan's grief was mingled with fury, at the palace, at the media, and even at William. "Why does it always have to come to this?" she whispered into the darkness. The only answer was the steady rhythm of Harry's labored breathing. In the stillness of the hospital room, Harry's mind drifted in and out of memories, as if his life were flashing before his eyes, not in a rush, but in slow, heavy fragments that seemed to weigh on his chest. For those who had watched him grow up in the public eye, he was the cheeky boy who brought light to his mother's funeral, the rebellious teenager who struggled with the burden of royal expectations, and later, the soldier who risked his life in Afghanistan. But beneath every public moment, there had been a storm brewing inside him, a storm that no one outside his closest circle ever truly understood. Harry's trauma didn't start when he stepped away from royal duties. It didn't begin with Meghan, nor with the media's relentless attacks in recent years. It began much earlier, in the cold halls of Kensington Palace, on the day his world fell apart. He was only 12 years old when Princess Diana died, and though decades have passed, the images of that day still haunted him. The long walk behind his mother's coffin, cameras clicking with ruthless precision, crowds watching in silence as he and William kept their expressions blank, it was all burned into his memory. At the time, Harry didn't fully understand why he was being asked to walk behind the coffin. Years later, he admitted in interviews that it felt cruel. "No child should be asked to do that," he had said in a moment of rare honesty. "But I had to. I didn't have a choice." That was how it always felt for Harry, no choice. As he grew older, the cracks began to show. At boarding school, he struggled with anger and isolation. While William adjusted to royal life with the stoicism expected of an heir, Harry rebelled. He was labeled despair, a phrase he would come to despise, a constant reminder that he existed in the shadow of his older brother. Teachers noticed his temper flaring at the smallest provocations. Friends would later recall how he would disappear for hours, wandering alone through the school grounds to escape the weight pressing on his chest. In his 20s, Harry sought solace in the military. For a brief time, the army gave him purpose. On the front lines in Afghanistan, he was just Captain Wales, not a prince, not a tabloid headline, but a soldier among soldiers. Yet even there, the trauma followed him. There were moments, a former comrade shared years later, when you can see it in his eyes. He was fighting two battles. The one out there in the desert and the one in his own head. When he returned to civilian life, the royal fishbowl only made things worse. The press hounded him relentlessly, portraying him alternately as a wild party boy and a tragic figure. He tried to smile for the cameras, but Meghan would later say that even back then, she could see how much he was struggling. He was carrying years of pain, she told a friend. And no one, not his family, not the institution, seemed to notice. But Meghan wasn't there yet. Before her, there had been long nights of drinking, reckless decisions, and therapy sessions Harry rarely stuck with. He opened up in moments of vulnerability about panic attacks in crowded rooms and a constant, gnawing fear that he'd never escape his mother's fate. When Meghan entered his life, Harry thought he had finally found a way out of the darkness. She was warm, confident, and fiercely protective, everything he had been yearning for. For a time, it felt like she had pulled him from the edge. But falling in love with Meghan brought its own set of storms. Their relationship triggered a media frenzy that quickly became toxic. Old wounds were torn open as the tabloids painted Meghan as a manipulative outsider, a divisive force in the family. Harry watched history repeat itself, the press vilifying the woman he loved, just as they had done to his mother. The weight of it crushed him. Then came the rift with William. Insiders said the brothers fought bitterly in private over Harry's relationship with Meghan. William, protective of the monarchy's traditions, reportedly warned Harry to slow down. Harry, sensitive to any hint of criticism toward Meghan, exploded. Friends who were there recalled shouting matches that ended with slammed doors and weeks of silence. They were inseparable once, said a palace aide. But then everything changed. It was as if the bond they had as boys was shattered overnight. When Harry and Meghan made the decision to step back from royal life, it was supposed to be a chance for peace. But the backlash that followed only deepened Harry's wounds. Critics accused him of betraying his family. Meghan became the target of racist abuse online and in print. and Harry found himself caught between the woman he loved and the institution he was born into. Now, lying in a hospital bed, his body ravaged by disease, Harry wondered if the years of mental anguish had taken more from him than he realized. "Did all of this make me sick?" he whispered weakly to Meghan one evening. She didn't answer right away. How could she? The doctors had already suggested that his condition was linked to stress, to years of suppressed emotions and psychological strain. It wasn't a simple cause and effect, but the human body could only endure so much. As Harry drifted into sleep, Meghan stroked his hair gently and thought about how much he had endured. The boy who lost his mother. The man who lost his family. And now, she feared, the father who might lose the chance to see his children grow up. The years of trauma had taken their toll. But the emotional wounds, the betrayal, the rejection, the unspoken words between two brothers seemed to hurt Harry more than any illness ever could. As the storm raged outside, Meghan sat motionless in the hospital room, her gaze fixed on Harry's face. The man lying in that bed wasn't the vibrant, mischievous prince she had fallen in love with, nor the confident husband and father who had once stood defiant against the institution that had suffocated him for so long. He was frail now, a shell of himself, his body wrecked by the relentless onslaught of disease and emotional torment. And yet, even as his chest rose and fell weakly beneath the hospital sheets, Meghan could see flickers of the man she knew in his furrowed brow, in the occasional squeeze of her hand when he woke in confusion and fear. Her role in this tragedy had become the subject of endless debate. To some, Meghan was a devoted wife, standing steadfastly by Harry as his world collapsed. To others, she was the spark that had ignited a firestorm in the House of Windsor, a force of disruption who had pulled Harry away from the only life he had ever known. But sitting here, in the stillness of this private suite, none of that mattered to her. What mattered was Harry's life, slipping through her fingers like sand. From the moment she entered his world, Meghan had been forced to navigate treacherous waters. At first, the royal family welcomed her with cautious optimism. The public fascination with the glamorous American actress seemed harmless enough. But cracks began to show quickly. Behind palace walls, Meghan felt the chill of centuries-old tradition. Every decision, from her wedding tiara to her choice of words in public speeches, was scrutinized. And Harry noticed. He had spent his life under that same microscope, but Meghan's experience seemed to reignite old wounds he thought he buried. The press's relentless attacks on Meghan, her heritage, her family, her personality, reminded him too much of what they had done to his mother. "She's strong, but no one can endure this forever," Harry had said once to a friend in Montecito. Meghan became his sanctuary, and he became her protector. Together, they had envisioned a life away from the suffocating expectations of the crown. But the escape hadn't come without a price. The decision to step back from royal duties, famously dubbed Megxit, turned the family's quiet tensions into open warfare. William, in particular, was said to be livid. Harry didn't consult anyone, a palace insider revealed. It was like he'd gone rogue, and William blamed Meghan for it all. To Meghan, it felt like an orchestrated attack. She told her inner circle that she believed the family was punishing her for speaking out, for daring to be different, for not knowing her place. She wasn't just an outsider by nationality, she was a disruptor in an ancient system built on unspoken rules. But as Harry's health declined, Meghan's anger had shifted. She wasn't thinking about titles or tabloids anymore. Her focus was singular, saving her husband. She had insisted on flying him back to London when his condition worsened. It wasn't an easy decision. Montecito had become their sanctuary, far from the royal machinery that once dictated their every move. But Meghan knew Harry needed more specialized care and lawn. "Harry didn't want to come back," said a friend. He was afraid. Afraid of facing his family again. Afraid of dying here, where he felt so betrayed. But Meghan persuaded him. Now, as she sat by his bedside, she was grappling with more than fear. Anger bubbled just beneath the surface. Anger at the institution that she believed had contributed to Harry's illness. Anger at the relentless public scrutiny. And anger at William's coldness. In the days since their arrival in London, Meghan had tried reaching out to the family. She had made calls to palace aides, sent messages through mutual friends, even written a letter to William himself. But the responses had been muted, formal, and utterly devoid of warmth. When William finally arrived at the hospital, Meghan had felt a surge of hope. Perhaps this would be the moment the brothers reconciled. Perhaps this would be the miracle Harry needed to fight a little longer. But it wasn't. William's icy demeanor shattered whatever fragile hope Meghan had been clinging to. Watching him turn and walk away from Harry's bedside had been too much. That man, she muttered later to a confidant, her voice low but venomous. That man doesn't deserve to call himself a brother. Some would say Meghan was lashing out because of her own guilt. Was she partly to blame for the rift between the brothers? Had she underestimated the power of the royal family she'd married into? Or was she simply a woman watching her husband die while his own family stood by in silence? Meghan's fighting battles on two fronts, said a source close to her. One for Harry's life, and one against the institution that's crushing him. At night, when the hospital ward grew quiet, Meghan would sit awake staring at Harry. She thought about Archie and Lilibet, too young to understand what was happening. Harry had recorded videos for them, just in case. Messages filled with love, advice, and apologies for not being there as they grew older. "Promise me they'll never forget me," he whispered to Meghan during one particularly lucid moment. "You're not going anywhere," Meghan said fiercely, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. No matter how much she fought, Meghan knew some battles couldn't be won. But she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. As dawn broke over London, Meghan resolved to try one last time. She would go to William directly if she had to. She would beg him, not for herself, but for Harry. Because whatever the world thought of Meghan Markle, devoted wife or divisive interloper, she wasn't about to let Harry leave this world believing his brother hated him. The hospital corridor was silent except for the rhythmic clicking of Meghan's heels as she stormed away from the private suite. Her chest heaved with rage and disbelief, her hands shaking so violently that Age trailing behind her dared not utter a word. Only minutes earlier, she had watched William stand like a marble statue at Harry's bedside, his jaw clenched, his blue eyes cold, and his voice devoid of emotion, as he refused the one thing his brother had begged for: forgiveness. To Meghan, it was unfathomable. How could William stand there and turn away? Didn't he see the machines monitoring Harry's fragile heartbeat, the deep hollows under his brother's eyes, the one strong hand that now trembled like a leaf in the wind? "He's your brother," Meghan had said, her voice breaking under the weight of desperation. "This might be your last chance to put things right." But William hadn't flinched. "I came here because I was asked to," he said calmly. "But I can't undo the damage that's been done. Not now. Not like this." Harry had tried to speak, his voice hoarse and weak. "Will, I never wanted it to end like this. I need you to know." But William had cut him off. "Don't," he said sharply. "It's too late for apologies." The words had pierced the room like shards of glass. Meghan had felt her heart plummet as Harry's hand fell limply to his side, his chest rising and falling with shallow, painful breaths. For a moment, she had thought William might soften, might realize how close his brother was to slipping away forever. But instead, he turned on his heel and walked out, his shoulders stiff, his stride unbroken. Now, as Meghan paced the corridor, her mind replayed every painful detail of that encounter. "This isn't just pride," she muttered to herself. "This is cruelty." Behind her, an aide tried to offer comfort. "Your Grace, perhaps the Prince of Wales just needs time." Time. Meghan snapped, spinning on her heel. Her eyes blazed with fury. Time is the one thing Harry doesn't have. But deep down, Meghan feared it wasn't about time. It was about a wound so deep, so infected with anger and betrayal, that nothing short of a miracle could heal it. The feud between Harry and William had been simmering for years, but no one, not even those closest to them, knew how bitter it had become until it boiled over in public. In their childhood, they had been inseparable. Diana's two boys, as she had lovingly called them, shared a bond forged in tragedy and strengthened by the peculiar pressures of royal life. After her death, Harry clung to William like a lifeline. But as the years passed, their paths diverged. William embraced his role as heir, bound by duty and tradition. Harry, on the other hand, began to chafe under the weight of expectation. When Meghan entered Harry's life, the cracks widened into chasms. William, ever cautious, had advised his brother to slow down, to consider carefully whether Meghan was truly the right match for a life in the monarchy's rigid framework. Harry took it as an insult, not just to Meghan but to his ability to make his own decisions. They had screaming matches behind closed doors, revealed one former palisade. They said things that couldn't be unsaid, and from that point, their relationship changed forever. The situation worsened with Harry and Meghan's departure from royal duties. William felt blindsided. Harry felt betrayed. The interviews that followed, particularly Harry's claim that William was trapped in the system, drove a deeper wedge between them. Now, years later, those words still seemed to echo between them in that hospital room. Why can't he let it go? Meghan whispered fiercely to herself as she leaned against the cold wall of the corridor. But perhaps William's refusal wasn't just about Harry. Perhaps it was about the monarchy itself. He's protecting the crown, said a longtime royal observer. In William's mind, Harry didn't just walk away. He detonated a bomb under the entire institution. To forgive him now would be admitting that Harry had a point. Yet Harry wasn't asking for an apology. He wasn't asking for William to admit defeat. He was asking for his brother's hand, one last time, before it was too late. Inside the suite, Harry stared at the ceiling, his eyes glassy with unshed tears. "Did he even look at me?" he asked Meghan softly when she returned, her face pale with anger. "Yes," Meghan lied. "He looked right at you." But Harry's faint smile faltered. Deep down, he knew the truth. "He hates me, doesn't he?" "No, Harry. He's hurt. But he doesn't hate you." Harry closed his eyes. "I wanted to tell him. I forgive him, even if he doesn't forgive me." Meghan sat on the edge of the bed and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "You'll get the chance," she said, though her voice trembled. "We're not giving up yet." But she wasn't sure if she believed her own words. The feud between the two princes wasn't just personal anymore. It was symbolic, a clash between old and new, tradition and rebellion, duty and freedom. And now, as Harry's life hung in the balance, it seemed like even death might not be enough to bridge the gap. While Meghan sat in that sterile hospital room watching her husband fade, a storm of a different kind was brewing inside the walls of Buckingham Palace. Behind the grand gates and polished marble halls, the royal family was grappling with a crisis that threatened to tear them apart, not just as an institution, but as a family bound by blood and centuries of expectation. The news of Harry's diagnosis had reached the highest levels of the monarchy weeks earlier. At first, there was shock. Then, silence. And now, as his condition worsened, that silence had splintered into a quiet panic. For all their efforts to appear composed in public, the royals were anything but united behind closed doors. King Charles was said to be deeply troubled. Sources close to the monarch described him as haunted by Harry's illness, pacing the corridors of Clarence House late at night, muttering to aides about how quickly everything had spiraled. He never imagined it would come to this, a senior courtier revealed. Harry was always his wild child, but he adored him. Now he fears his son might not live long enough for reconciliation. Charles had reportedly urged William to visit Harry, believing that his son's feud was breaking Harry's spirit. But even the king's pleas fell on deaf ears. William sees this as a matter of principle, the same courtier explained. He feels Harry betrayed the family, and no amount of illness will erase that. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla had adopted a different approach, pragmatic, almost cold. In a private meeting with Charles, she had reportedly warned him not to let Harry's illness distract from the crown's priorities. "Camilla knows the monarchy has survived worse scandals," said a palace insider. "But she also knows how damaging it would be if the public believed the family abandoned Harry in his final days." Yet the divide between duty and compassion seemed impossible to bridge. Kate, the Princess of Wales, was caught in the middle. Friends said she had tried to persuade William to go to the hospital, to at least speak to Harry one last time. She told William that he'd regret it for the rest of his life if he didn't, said one of Kate's confidants. But William is stubborn. He told her she doesn't understand what Harry has done. Kate herself had once been close to Harry. In the early years of her marriage, Harry had affectionately called her the sister I never had. But after Meghan entered the picture, that warmth had cooled. Now, as she watched her husband wrestle with his anger, Kate reportedly struggled with her own feelings of guilt and helplessness. She worries that if Harry dies, the feud will become William's greatest regret, said a family friend. But she also knows William feels betrayed on a level he's never felt before. Inside the palace, staff whispered nervously about the fallout. The senior courtiers, ever protective of the monarchy's image, worked tirelessly to control the narrative. Official statements about Harry's illness were carefully crafted to appear compassionate but non-committal. There are fears that if Harry passes away, the public will turn on the family, one aide admitted. They're walking a tightrope between appearing human and protecting the institution. Yet some in the family were less concerned about optics. Princess Anne, known for her bluntness, reportedly told Charles that Harry had made his bed and must now lie in it. She doesn't have patience for all this drama, said a palace source. To her, Harry walked away from his duty, and now he must live, or die, with the consequences. Even Prince Andrew, disgraced and exiled from public life, weighed in during a private conversation with Charles. According to one source, Andrew warned his brother that Harry's death could spark a tsunami of public grief that might rival Diana's. Do you remember 1997? Andrew reportedly said, "The people won't forgive us if they think we let Harry die alone." The king was said to have fallen silent at those words, his mind flashing back to the sea of flowers outside Kensington Palace and the crowds who had booed the royals for their coldness after Diana's death. For Charles, this felt like history repeating itself. And then there were the children. Archie and Lilibet, Harry and Meghan's young son and daughter, were being kept away from the hospital for now. But their names were whispered often in private family meetings. "They are the innocent ones in all this," Kate reportedly said to William one evening. "If nothing else, think of them." But William's response had been chillingly calm. "I am thinking of them. I'm thinking about how their father destroyed everything we were supposed to be." Those words weighed heavily on Kate, who had quietly confided in a friend that she feared William's grief and anger were blinding him. "This family has always been a fortress," Kate had said, tears in her eyes. "But what good is a fortress if it keeps out the people who need us most?" As the royals deliberated, Harry's condition deteriorated further. Meghan's repeated calls to palace aides became more desperate. She even left messages directly for Charles, pleading with him to intervene. But the king's response was carefully measured. "We will support Harry as much as we can," Charles told her. "But reconciliation must come from my sons, not from me." That answer did nothing to soothe Meghan's growing fury. In the palace's gilded halls, the family debated, hesitated, and calculated. But in that hospital room, time was running out. It began with whispers, subtle signs that something wasn't right. Harry had brushed them off at first. He told Meghan he was just tired, run down from the endless travel and the stress of trying to keep their young family afloat amidst constant scrutiny. But deep down, Meghan knew it was more than exhaustion. She had watched him struggle to catch his breath on their evening walks in Montecito, had seen the way he winced in pain when lifting Archie, how his once robust frame seemed to shrink before her eyes. Still, Harry resisted seeking help. For a man who had spent his life being watched, analyzed, and dissected in the public eye, admitting weakness felt impossible. In his mind, doctors meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant inviting more judgment from the world he had fought so hard to escape. "Let's wait a bit," he told Meghan one night, his voice quiet as they lay in bed. "It's probably nothing." But Meghan wasn't convinced. When Harry collapsed on the floor one sunny California morning, all excuses evaporated. Meghan screamed for help as staff rushed in, Archie crying in the background. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but to Meghan, it felt like hours. As they wheeled Harry out of their home, his face ghostly pale and his lips tinged with blue, she felt a surge of terror she had never known before. At the hospital in Santa Barbara, doctors worked frantically to stabilize him. Meghan sat in the corner of the room clutching Lilibet, silent tears streaming down her face as monitors beeped and nurses whispered in hurried tones. Hours later, the head physician entered the waiting room, his expression grave. "We've identified the problem," he began cautiously. "Prince Harry has a severe autoimmune disease. It's advanced quite aggressively." Meghan stared at him, uncomprehending. "What does that mean?" "Autoimmune." The doctor explained that Harry's immune system, designed to protect him, had turned on his own body. It was attacking healthy cells, mistaking them for invaders. Organs were failing, systems shutting down. The years of mental strain, physical exhaustion, and emotional turmoil had likely exacerbated the condition. "Could stress do this?" Meghan asked, her voice shaking. "Yes," the doctor said softly. "Stress, trauma, they can be significant triggers." Meghan felt the room spin. Back at home, Meghan and Harry tried to process the diagnosis together. Harry, ever the pragmatist, tried to make jokes. "Well, I suppose I've cheated death before. Let's see if I can do it again." But Meghan could see through his forced smile. She could see the fear in his eyes, the quiet resignation in his voice. The decision to fly to London came days later when Harry's doctors recommended a specialist based in the UK who had treated similar rare cases. Meghan was hesitant. London felt like enemy territory to her, a place filled with ghosts and judgment. But Harry insisted. "If this is it," he told her, "I want to be close to them, even if they don't want me there." And so, they made the journey. Once in London, the reality of Harry's situation became undeniable to the royal family. Palace doctors were briefed. Charles was informed immediately. William was told, though his reaction was muted. For Meghan, the diagnosis became more than a medical crisis. It was proof of everything she had feared, that the years of emotional strain had destroyed Harry from the inside out. "They killed him," she whispered angrily to a friend during one late-night call. "All of them. The press, the palace, the so-called family. They've been tearing him apart since he was a boy, and now his body's doing the same." But anger couldn't change the reality staring her in the face. Harry was dying, and no amount of love, no amount of determination could stop it. As she sat beside him in that sterile hospital room, watching the rise and fall of his chest, Meghan silently vowed to fight. Not just for Harry's life, but for the dignity he deserved in these final days. In the days following their return to London, the atmosphere around Meghan Markle grew darker and heavier, like a storm cloud hovering just above her head. She had hoped that bringing Harry back to the UK would give him access to the world's best medical care and, perhaps, open a path toward healing the wounds between him and his family. But as she sat in that stark hospital room, staring at the pale face of the man she loved, Meghan felt something else rise within her, an anger so intense it threatened to consume her entirely. "They did this to him," she whispered under her breath one evening, her voice sharp, her eyes fixed on the blank hospital wall. To those closest to her, it was clear that Meghan wasn't simply grieving Harry's condition. She was waging a mental war with the institution she believed had destroyed him. In her mind, the palace's coldness, the media's cruelty, and even the family's failure to protect Harry from relentless pressures had all culminated in this moment, his body now betraying him in the same way he felt betrayed by those around him. Meghan hadn't wanted to return to London. Montecito had become her fortress, a place where she could control their narrative and shield Harry from the relentless attacks of tabloids and online hate. But Harry insisted on coming back. For him, there was something symbolic about returning to the country where it had all started: the love, the betrayal, the departure, and perhaps finding peace on the very soil where he had experienced so much pain. But peace was the last thing Meghan found in London. From the moment they landed, it was clear that their presence unsettled the royals. There were whispers in palace corridors about security arrangements, about how much access Harry should have to family residences, and about whether Meghan would be welcome at all. "They're treating us like intruders," Meghan fumed to a friend over the phone. "Like we're here to cause trouble instead of trying to save Harry's life." Even within the hospital walls, Meghan could sense the tension. When Charles came to visit Harry, he arrived alone, his face drawn and weary. Meghan had stepped out to give them space, hoping perhaps that father and son might find common ground in Harry's darkest hour. But when Charles emerged an hour later, his expression was grim. "He's angry," Charles admitted quietly to Meghan. "Not at you. Not at me. At everything. I don't know if he'll ever forgive us." Meghan's lips tightened. "He shouldn't have to forgive you. You should be asking him for forgiveness." Charles had said nothing more, only nodding slightly before walking away. But it wasn't Charles who occupied Meghan's thoughts the most. It was William. Harry's older brother had always been a looming figure in their story, a symbol of the life Harry left behind and the family dynamics that had suffocated them both. Meghan had tried reaching out to William several times, sending texts and leaving voicemails pleading for him to visit Harry. "Do it for your brother," she had said in one message. "Not for the institution, not for the public, for him." But there was no reply. The silence enraged Meghan. To her, it wasn't just a brother ignoring a brother. It was a future king refusing to be human. "I will never forgive him for this," Meghan confided to a close aide. "Harry's begging to see him, and William won't even pick up the phone. How can someone be so cold?" But those within the palace told a different story. William believes Meghan is still manipulating Harry, a senior royal source claimed. He thinks she's using Harry's illness to pull him back into her orbit and drag the family into yet another public spectacle. That accusation only fueled Meghan's fury. "Manipulating him?" she snapped to a friend after hearing of the remark. "I'm trying to save his life. Where was William when Harry was suffering? Where was the palace when he cried out for help? Now they want to act like I'm the villain." The tension between Meghan and the royal family wasn't new, but it had never felt so raw. In Meghan's mind, every cold glance, every clipped response from aides, every headline calling her divisive or calculating was another strike against her husband's health. "This isn't just about Harry's body breaking down," Meghan said to one confidant. It's about years of mental torture that the palace watched happen and did nothing to stop. And now they expect me to play nice while he dies. Even Harry, in his moments of lucidity, seemed torn. Don't fight them, Meg, he whispered weakly one evening as she ranted about William's refusal to visit. It's not worth it. But Meghan couldn't stop fighting. Not now. Not while she believed Harry's life and legacy depended on it. Behind closed doors, Meghan reportedly began keeping detailed notes of her interactions with the family and their aides. Some speculated that she feared they might try to twist the narrative if Harry passed away, casting her as the villain in the story of his final days. She's preparing herself, said a source close to the Sussexes. Meghan knows the institution never protected her or Harry. She's ready to protect herself and her children at all costs. But palace insiders accused Meghan of stoking division at the very moment unity was most needed. She has an extraordinary ability to turn everything into a battle, one aide remarked bitterly. Even now, she's still fighting rather than focusing on Harry's peace. Meghan's defenders, however, saw it differently. She's fighting because no one else will, said a friend. Harry doesn't have the strength anymore. If she doesn't stand up for him, who will? The blame game intensified as Harry's condition worsened. Meghan, exhausted and furious, began openly questioning whether the family's coldness was accelerating Harry's decline. Every time he asks about William or Charles and I have to lie to protect his heart, I see him slipping further away, she said in a rare moment of vulnerability to a nurse. It's like they're killing him twice, once with their silence and again with their absence. But even as her anger burned, Meghan knew time was running out. Harry's doctors had warned her that any major emotional distress could further weaken his fragile state. And yet, as much as she wanted to shield him, she couldn't stop herself from resenting the family that seemed content to watch from a distance as Harry fought for his life. The soft glow of the hospital monitors cast an eerie light over Harry's face as he drifted in and out of consciousness. His chest rose and fell with labored breaths, each one sounding more fragile than the last. Meghan sat at his side, gripping his hand as though her touch alone could hold him here in this world. The doctors had been blunt earlier that morning. Harry's condition was deteriorating rapidly. His immune system was collapsing under the relentless assault of his own body. It was only a matter of time now. But Harry's thoughts weren't on his pain, or even his children. They were on his brother. Has William called? Harry asked weakly, his voice hoarse. Meghan felt her throat tighten. She hesitated, knowing that the truth could break him. He's thinking about it, she said gently, forcing a smile. I've sent him another message. He knows you want to see him. Harry closed his eyes, a single tear sliding down his pale cheek. Please, he whispered. Just once. I need to tell him. I'm sorry. I need to tell him I forgive him. Meghan's chest ached as she nodded. I'll try again, Harry. I'll make sure he knows. But in her heart, she already knew the answer. For days, Meghan had pleaded with William, leaving voicemails and sending texts that went unanswered. She had even called Kate, hoping the Princess of Wales might intervene. Kate had listened quietly, her tone soft but firm. Meghan, I'm so sorry about Harry. But William isn't ready. He feels it wouldn't change anything now. Not ready. Meghan's voice had cracked with disbelief. Harry's dying. He doesn't have time for William to be ready. I know, Kate said, her own voice thick with emotion. I've tried. But William, he's hurting too. Meghan had hung up without replying, her hands shaking as she stared at the phone. Now, in the hospital room, she watched Harry struggle to stay awake. His lips moved as though he were speaking to someone in his dreams. Will, he murmured. I'm sorry, don't hate me. Meghan brushed his hair back gently, tears spilling down her face. He doesn't hate you, Harry, she whispered, though she wasn't sure she believed it. He just doesn't know how to love you right now. When William finally appeared at the hospital the next day, Meghan felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he had listened. Maybe he had come to make amends. But the moment she saw his face, her hope turned to dread. William stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. His tailored suit was immaculate, his posture rigid, but there was no warmth in his eyes as he glanced toward the bed. William, Meghan said softly, rising from her chair. Thank you for coming. He's been asking for you. William gave a curt nod but didn't move closer. I came because the king asked me to, he said flatly. Meghan's hands clenched at her sides. This isn't about the king. This is about your brother. William's gaze flicked to Harry, who stirred weakly at the sound of his voice. Will? Harry whispered, his eyes fluttering open. William stepped forward slightly, but there was no emotion in his voice as he spoke. I heard you wanted to see me. Harry's face lit up faintly, though his hands trembled as he reached out. Yes, please. I don't have much time. I just want. But William raised a hand to stop him. Harry, he said firmly, this doesn't change anything. Harry's fragile smile faltered. Please. I'm sorry for everything. I don't want to leave this world like this. William's jaw tightened. You made your choices. You walked away from this family. And now you expect everything to be forgiven because you're dying. Meghan gasped softly. How dare you, she said, her voice shaking with fury. He's your brother. He's asking for your forgiveness. Can't you see what this is doing to him? William didn't answer. He looked at Harry for a long, heavy moment, then turned to leave. William, Meghan cried. If you walk out now, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. But William didn't stop. I already regret enough, he said quietly, before disappearing down the corridor. The sound of the door closing echoed in the room like a death knell. Harry turned his face away, silent tears slipping down his cheeks. Meghan sat beside him, her own tears falling freely. He'll come around, she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. I'll make him see. I promise. But Harry only shook his head weakly. No, he's gone. He's been gone for a long time. As news of Prince Harry's condition seeped into the public domain, it spread like wildfire, igniting conversations, debates, and raw emotion across the globe. For millions of people who had grown up watching the two royal brothers walk side by side, first as grieving boys behind their mother's coffin, later as young men navigating a life of duty and privilege, the idea that one of them was now clinging to life while estranged from the other was almost too much to bear. Social media platforms became flooded with hashtags like #ForgiveHarry, #WhereIsWilliam, and #PrayForHarry. Messages of support poured in from every corner of the world. Ordinary citizens, celebrities, and even heads of state sent their prayers and well wishes for Harry's recovery. But alongside the outpouring of sympathy was a growing sense of outrage, one that threatened to engulf the royal family in yet another crisis of public opinion. How can William live with himself if Harry dies before they make peace? Asked one Twitter user, her post garnering hundreds of thousands of likes within hours. Others took a harsher stance. Harry brought this on himself, a royal commentator said on live television. He abandoned his duty, attacked his family in public, and now expects them to welcome him back because he's ill? Actions have consequences. But it was Meghan's role in the unfolding drama that polarized opinion the most. To her supporters, she was a devoted wife fighting to save her husband's life and dignity against an institution that had turned its back on him. Whatever you think of Meghan, she's standing by Harry when no one else will, wrote one journalist in a widely shared op-ed. That's love. That's loyalty. Yet critics painted a darker picture. They accused Meghan of using Harry's illness to manipulate public sentiment and drag the royal family into another wave of scandal. She's playing the victim again, said a well-known British tabloid columnist. Mark my words, this is all part of her plan to rewrite history and make the royal family look like monsters. Outside Buckingham Palace, crowds gathered with candles, flowers, and handwritten notes for Harry. Some wept openly, recalling the boy they had watched grow into a man who seemed forever haunted by loss. I still see Diana's little boy in him, said one elderly woman, her voice trembling as she laid a bouquet against the palace gates. This shouldn't be happening. Not again. The echoes of Princess Diana's death loomed large in the public consciousness. Commentators drew parallels between the way the monarchy had been criticized for its coldness in 1997 and the current perception that the family was failing Harry in his greatest hour of need. The monarchy risks another Diana moment, warned a royal historian during a televised debate. If Harry dies and the public believes his family abandoned him, the fallout could be catastrophic. Across the Atlantic, the reaction was equally fierce. American networks aired special segments dissecting the feud between Harry and William, while talk shows debated whether Meghan was a victim or a villain. In California, crowds left flowers and letters outside the gates of Harry and Meghan's Montecito estate, even though the couple wasn't there. But perhaps the most surprising response came from soldiers and veterans Harry had worked with through the Invictus Games. Many of them recorded heartfelt video messages, urging him to keep fighting. "You've been our inspiration, Harry," said one wounded veteran in a viral clip. "Now it's our turn to inspire you. Don't give up." Even those who had criticized Harry in the past seemed to soften in the face of his illness. I didn't agree with the way he left the royal family, admitted a prominent British MP in Parliament. But none of that matters now. What matters is compassion, humanity, and reconciliation. Despite the global wave of sympathy, there was also confusion and speculation. Why hadn't William made peace with his brother? Why hadn't the family come together in Harry's time of need? Where is the humanity? Asked one journalist in a searing editorial. A man is dying, and his brother refuses to take his hand. If this is what royalty means, perhaps it's time we reconsider the whole institution. As public pressure mounted, palace aides scrambled to manage the narrative. Carefully worded statements were released, expressing the family's concern for Harry's health and their hopes for his recovery. But the lack of visible action, no visits from William, no photographs of family unity, only fueled the fire. Protests even erupted outside royal residences. In London, demonstrators held signs reading "Harry deserves love" and "Forgive before it's too late." Meanwhile, Meghan remained steadfast in the hospital room, oblivious to, or perhaps deliberately ignoring, the media frenzy outside. They don't care about Harry, she told a friend in a hushed phone call. They care about their image. That's all they've ever cared about. But as Harry's condition worsened, even Meghan couldn't deny the power of the public's voice. "The world is watching," she said quietly to a nurse one evening. "And I hope William knows that too." As Prince Harry lay fragile and pale in the hospital room, memories of his mother seemed to float around him like unseen ghosts. For Meghan, it was impossible not to think of Diana, the woman whose life and death had shaped Harry in ways even he could never fully articulate. And for millions watching this tragedy unfold from a distance, one question echoed louder than all others. Would Diana have been able to heal this rift between her sons if she were still here? Harry spoke of her often during his waking moments, sometimes with clarity, other times with a dreamy haze, as if he were slipping between the past and the present. "Mum, she wouldn't want this," he whispered one night, his voice almost inaudible over the steady beep of the heart monitor. "She'd hate to see us like this." Meghan squeezed his hand, her own heart aching at his words. "I know, Harry," she said softly. "I know she'd want you and William to find your way back to each other. I've tried, but he won't listen." Harry closed his eyes, his lips trembling. She was the only one who could make him listen. It was true. Diana had been the bridge between her two sons, binding them together in their shared grief after her tragic death. As boys, William and Harry clung to each other for comfort, walking behind her coffin as the eyes of the world bore down on them. That image, two young princes, side by side in mourning, had etched itself into the collective memory of a generation. In public, they had always seemed inseparable. But privately, the shadow of Diana's absence loomed large. She had been their emotional anchor, the one who could see through the monarchy's stiff upper lip and demand her sons be treated like human beings rather than heirs to an ancient institution. Without her, Harry and William had grown into men shaped by very different influences. William had gravitated toward the stability of royal duty, his every step guided by the knowledge that he would one day be king. Harry, on the other hand, felt untethered, despair, without purpose, adrift in a world of expectations he could never meet. Diana's death was the breaking point for Harry, said a royal biographer in a recent interview. And the monarchy's coldness in the days that followed taught him a lesson he never forgot, that this family prioritizes duty over love. Those who knew Diana best believed she would have been devastated by her son's estrangement. "She adored those boys," said a close friend of the late princess. "If she were here, she wouldn't have allowed this feud to go on. She'd have sat them down and made them talk." Diana had a way of cutting through all the noise. But Diana wasn't here. And without her, the rift had deepened into an abyss. In the hospital room, Meghan often caught Harry staring at the framed photograph of Diana she had brought with them from Montecito. It sat on the table by his bed, a reminder of the woman who had once shielded him from the world's harshness. "She was the only one who really saw me," Harry said one evening, his voice breaking. "Not the prince, not the spare, just me." Meghan felt her chest tighten as she stroked his hair. "She'd be so proud of you, Harry," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've done everything to protect our family, just like she did." But Meghan couldn't help but wonder, was she living in Diana's shadow? To the public, Meghan's arrival in Harry's life had often been compared to Diana's rebellious spirit. Some saw her as a modern-day Diana, unafraid to challenge the monarchy's rigid traditions. Others viewed her as an interloper, exploiting Harry's pain and driving a wedge between him and his brother. "She's not Diana," said one palace insider. She doesn't have Diana's tact. Meghan may think she's fighting for Harry, but all she's done is push him further from his family. But Meghan's defenders argued the opposite. Diana would have loved Meghan, said a close friend of the Sussexes. She would have seen in her a kindred spirit, someone willing to stand up to the system for the man she loves. As Harry drifted into a restless sleep, Meghan looked again at the photograph of Diana. She wondered what advice the late princess would have given her if she were alive. Would Diana have told her to keep fighting for Harry's health, even if it meant clashing with the family? Or would she have urged her to step back, to let Harry and William find their own way back to each other? One thing seemed certain. If Diana were alive, Harry might not be in this hospital bed at all. The stress, the trauma, it all started with her death, said a family friend. Losing her broke something in Harry that never healed, and the family never stepped in to fill that gap. As Meghan held Harry's hand, she felt a sudden surge of determination. If Diana could fight for her sons against this institution, Meghan whispered to herself, then so can I. But deep in her heart, she feared that even Diana's presence wouldn't have been enough to save Harry from the forces that had shaped his life and were now threatening to end it.